Thank you so much for coming to the session. I want to welcome you and thank you for your time. And today I'll be spending about 15 minutes talking about Twitter in the classroom. I want to say that actually last year was the first time that I used Twitter in my classroom, and I found it to be beneficial, and also noticed some pitfalls that I thought I could have avoided from the beginning. So I will share my experience with you, and also I consider my own experience just one case, and I'm sure a lot of you have been using it or thinking about using it, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your experiences or your advice. So let me get this started. So why do I, first of all, use Twitter in the classroom? As a matter of fact, many students are already on Twitter. I did a poll in my class. About half the students in my class, two classes, have used Twitter for their own personal exchanges, but few of them have used it for class. The other reason that I use Twitter is because I actually teach new media classes, and for many of my students who are graduating from the department, they actually need social media experiences for their future jobs and professional development. So those are some of the primary reasons why I adopted Twitter for the classroom. Also, a lot of us realize that Twitter can be a space for socialization. People use it for daily exchanges, very much the same way they use Facebook. But at the same time, it can also be beneficial in an interesting space for information, knowledge, and professional development. That's what I want to focus on today. I want to emphasize that the end goal here is teaching and learning, not about the technology of Twitter per se. A lot of people think, if we could wave a magical wand and have technology and that would just do the work for us. And I don't think that's true. It requires a lot of work and hard work on our part. So let me now introduce to you why I'm interested in Twitter. I consider Twitter a really interesting platform for not only social exchange, but also professional and research exchange. I have used Twitter primarily for research purposes for the most part. So I've been using it since about 2011, so almost 2 years and a half. On this slide, I'd like to introduce to you the two classes that I've been using Twitter for. The one on the left is a global media class, a 3000 level class. The one on the right is a media technology and society, which is also a 3000 level class. And I have used two different handles on Twitter for the two different classes. So one is UNCC GM, standing for Global Media, and the other one is UNCC MTS, standing for the other class. And each of these two classes actually had about 35 students. One of the classes, because it was so hard, half of the students actually dropped out of the class, so I ended up having probably 20 students in the Global Media class. Next, I will talk a little bit about how to manage the different accounts that you might have for different classes. So as you can tell here, this is actually a screenshot of my iPhone, which shows the 3 different accounts that I have on Twitter. So if you have a mobile phone, it's actually a smartphone specifically, it's fairly easy to manage different accounts compared to a desktop. And next, let me talk a little bit about the actual class. So this is the actual class setting. I initially would, in the first class, introduce Twitter to students. I would give them a demo teaching them about Twitter, because actually surprisingly half the students didn't use Twitter for anything and didn't know much about it. I also encourage peer teaching, since their peers, some students in the classroom already had used it before, and I asked them to show to their fellow students how to use it. I asked then students to register a Twitter account. So they were informed, for instance, that they could use pseudonyms, nicknames, and they don't have to use their real identity if they don't want to, but they have to tell me who they are and what Twitter handle they're using so that I can follow them on Twitter. And I also require them to follow the class handle or class account so that we could have a conversation, and that I recognize them on Twitter, and so do they. And then also, because the way the class has been set up, I asked students specifically to read book chapter or to read a journal article or a news article for every class time that we meet. We actually met twice a week. So for every class period, they have to read a chapter first and then come to class handing in their notes, reading notes to me, one-page notes, including one or two quotations. And these one or two quotations, I require them to post on Twitter so that we would have an archive of students' thoughts and feelings and what they have learned basically from the chapter that they read. And now I will move on to give you some examples of how students perceive this and how they have been using this. I did spend quite a bit of time talking about the etiquette on Twitter, how to use it, how to manage the public and private parts of their accounts. And in this example, actually, Christy, she was one of my students, and she set her account as private. Actually, you can do that on Twitter. As you can tell from her homepage on Twitter, there's a lock at the bottom that tells me that her account actually has been set to private, which means that we cannot read her tweets. But once she accepts my invitation and include me as one of her followers, then I could actually see her accounts. And as long as she is tweeting to the class account, I could see what kind of quotations that she gathered to be important for the class. I also thought it was really important for students to use nicknames if they do want to disguise their identity, which I think is something the students have to decide. I also talked about the kind of language used on Twitter, since most people have been using it for public exchange, and I spent quite a bit of time talking about that aspect as well. I told them I won't track their every tweet or every move on Twitter to respect their privacy as well. But I made a really important point for them to understand that the boundaries between what is public and what is private has to be decided by themselves.